Art, good morning to you in Tokyo. And it's 7:30. It's 7:45 in the morning in India, Mumbai. So thanks a lot. It's for me, it's a dream come true because I've read your name ever since Sensei Masaki Mai introduced you to me and gave me his book Gemba Kaisen. And there was this a chapter, I think, case study 1, if I'm not mistaken, of Wiremold. And that's how I came to know. And then subsequently, it was art. Every time that I hear art, the tagline was "Roll up your sleeves." And I remember Mark Deluzio telling me that Art would wear his jeans and pull him out to the Gamba and ask him to do Smith. So thanks for being there for me. And a short, this is standard work for me. And there we go. There you are, in your favorite pink. I love this pink of yours. And the theme that I am been pursuing of series 1, and I think I will never do a series 2. Series 1 is about, irrespective of which path of continuous improvement that you're taking, whatever you're comfortable with, I take it as a tool. I am an ardent follower of what Sensei Masaki Mai has taught me is men can wait, machine can wait, material must flow. So I look at the flow part of it. So irrespective of what you do, you reach a point and there's some sort of initial gain and you stagnate. So all what I was looking at, how do you scaffold it, the initiative, and how you sustain it. That's the theme of my episode, which I've been running it from September last year, and you're on the 32nd episode. I'm not introducing you because you're going to talk about everything, and I'm going to just listen to you. So great that you have 2 awards that I could find from my Google. There's 99 Shingo Award. That's where you did the Wiremold, and I think 2,400 plus. I know the percentage. In 10 years, you got the improvement. And the second thing is for the book, Lean Turnaround Action Guide. That was just 4 years ago. I was wondering, and I asked somebody that how many halls of fame are still left for you to be there? You're there in AME's Hall of Fame and the Industry Week magazine's Manufacturing Hall of Fame. Art?
Well, Shingo Prize also has one, and I'm in that too.
Yeah. Why don't I kill it? And I'm going to say you're going to be out there in Shingo too.
I think it's called the Shingo Academy.
I will do that. Thanks for that input. There we go.
Okay.
And this is what we're going to talk about. You're going to talk about, and I'm going to listen to you. And it's on Lean Turnaround. And you're there on Dr. M's vodcast. And I'm going to stop sharing Art and handing it over to you. And at the end of your presentation, there are certain questions, and permit me to ask you that. So I'm going to kill the screen, and over to you, Art.
Okay. Let's see if I can bring this up.
Yeah.
All right. All right, I can't get to the slideshow here for some reason, but um, why don't we just try it without the slideshow if it's not too,
That's perfect. No
if
problem at all.
not too
Yeah,
annoying.
you can try play and see what happens.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah,
All right, now we have it.
perfect, sir.
Okay,
All
so
yours, Art.
hello, everybody. I just wanted to give you an overview of the lean turnaround. My own lean journey started in January of 1982 during my first general manager job at the General Electric Company. We just created a small Kanban system, but we got tremendous results. Although at that time in GE, no one really cared about cash flow and inventory turns, those kind of things. It was all just make the month. But anyway, I've always looked at lean from a business point of view and not just as some cost reduction program. So if we're going to look at it from a business point of view, let's start by defining what is a business. And I think, this definition applies to any kind of business, whether you're manufacturing, service company, hospital, whatever. A business, any business, is nothing but a group of people and a bunch of processes delivering value to a set of customers where the best team is always going to win. Now, most people can agree with this until I come to your business. And then when I come to your business, you're going to say, well, Art, you don't understand. My business is so much more complicated. We have all these problems, blah, blah, blah. So basically, instead of looking at it in a simplistic way, you're going to make it so complicated that you're never going to get any better. So you just have to stop that and come back to this simplistic view because if you can think simply, it's going to make things a lot easier. Because in a simple way, what we're trying to do is we're just trying to go from batch organizations to flow, which means we're going to go from trying to push things through the system to pulling through the things through the system. And the other key thing, which is kind of a showstopper for a lot of companies, is you have to understand starting out that what you're trying to convert is the whole enterprise. You're not just trying to do something in manufacturing or the business. You got to convert everybody if you want to be a lean enterprise. So I'm now going to talk a little bit about what's the opportunity. And I got several slides here that talk about things that go on in batch companies or the way that batch companies behave. That once you understand them, you'll understand why there's such a big opportunity for lean. To begin with, the traditional batch company has, in my opinion, this has been my experience, 25 to 40% too many people, uses 40 to 50% too much space, pulls 5 to 6 times too much inventory, and has excess lead times. Now, if I talk to anybody that's in a batch company or runs a batch company, they'll disagree with this 100%. But it's always true. These facts are always true. And that's the reason that lean companies can get so much gain is they're starting out from this base. The next thing is that the batch company, the traditional company, they take the value adding for granted. They'll look at 2 to 3 hour setup times and say, well, there's nothing we can do about that. And therefore, we have to have a 6 to 8 week lead time. And, nothing we can do. And so what we're trying to do is we're doing in that case is we're making our customers conform to them as opposed to them trying to conform to their customer. Batch companies also tend to produce to a forecast because they're batching and they produce in large batches. By doing that, they separate production from the customer. All production does is shut up and make the forecast. So they never really see or feel the customer in any way. And unfortunately, with a 6 to 8 week lead time, the forecast is always going to be wrong. And so these companies, instead of trying to fix their processes, which are causing these problems in the first place, instead they go the other way and they try and spend a lot of time and money looking for a better forecast, which is, as long as your processes give you 6 to 8 week lead times, a better forecast isn't going to do you any good because you still have the 6 to 8 week lead times. You're always going to be wrong. On top of that, most traditional batch companies focus on something what I call make the month. The way the company is based on the financial results at the end of every month. But the month that they're driving for all the time is not something that's real. It's something that they made up at budget time. And then after that, it takes about 3 weeks for them to close the books at the end of a month. Then they hold a big financial review of something that already happened. In the meantime, other things are happening and they're not paying attention to that. So make the month forces companies to, in my opinion, to always be looking backwards at what happened last month. And it really doesn't make any sense. Then on top of that, they add in standard cost accounting. Now, standard cost accounting is something that, in my opinion, can't really be understood by humans. It gives poor information, and as a result, you wind up making bad decisions because the information is bad. On top of that, it incentivizes inventory build. And of course, inventory is the number one waste that we're trying to get rid of with lean. So you've got something that is built into most standard, most traditional companies that incentivizes all the things we're trying to get rid of with lean. And by incentivizing inventory build, you're doing it because you're put a priority on making absorption hours versus a priority on the customer. Plus, it's very expensive to do standard cost accounting. You got tickets to collect all this data, and none of it really helps you very much at all. On top of that, you got what I could call sales policy. A lot of the things that batch companies do are really against what we're trying to do with lean. For example, their sales policy tends to focus on big batch orders, and they give volume discounts for this. I guess the theory is that, well, if we can make it in a big batch, we can afford to give a discount. But that's silly because they make everything in a big batch. So they're kidding themselves that they think they're going to lower costs by producing another big batch. They produce everything in a batch. And then they try and do end of month sales tricks to, bring next month's demand into this month so that they can make the month. And one of the things that I think all manufacturing companies should ask themselves, and this is a question that I asked when I went to become CEO of Wiremold. One of my first questions was, what percentage of our shipments go in the last week of the month? Well, the answer was 50%. I said, well, wait a minute, I'm going to try and convert this business to lean, level load the production. How can I deal with the 50% shipments in the last week of the month? I can't. Besides, if we're shipping 50% in the last week of the month, that's half of the other 3 weeks of the month. This doesn't make any sense at all. And so when you look into that, you're always going to find that if you have a situation like this, it's something that you did that caused it. This isn't caused necessarily by the customer. It's something that you did. And in our case, it was our sales terms. Our sales terms incentivized our distributors, mostly through distributors, incentivized to order in the last week of the month. So the solution was change the sales terms and level out the incoming demand, which we did. The other key thing, and I think this is one of the biggest wastes of all that traditional companies have, is the organizational structure that they have sort of bakes in the waste. Most of these batch companies are organized by functions. It's kind of like if they believe that if you put all the similar machines in the same department near each other, that the machines will be happier or something. I don't know why you would do it this way, but for some reason, it's been traditionally that way, that we put all the similar kinds of machines in one department. So that creates lots of fiefdoms. There's not much teamwork really going on. And on top of that, belief from above that cost reduction can only occur through capital spending. And so that's the way that most traditional companies think about this. And we have what I call the command and control management system, which is just shut up and do what we tell you to do. And that means nothing really flows up, everything flows down, which is never a good situation. So let me illustrate this structural piece a little bit further, because I think it's very critical to understand why there's so many opportunities for the conversion to lean. The structure that I'm talking about looks sort of like this typical batch manufacturing layout, where you see all the screw machines in one department, all the drilling machines in another department, all the punch presses in another department. And these can be pretty far away from each other inside of a business building, or they can actually be in separate buildings or in even separate towns sometimes. And because the parts, in order to make the product, you've got to go through all these 8 steps. You have to move the parts between these different departments. And of course, the parts are small, they get very tired. And so we have to give them a place to rest. So we create this work in process warehouse, which just creates a lot of excess inventory and a lot of excess movement and other things that go on. And that's why when you have a structure like this, you're going to wind up with 6 to 8 week lead times, because getting something through this maze is very, very complicated. So now what we want to do is not do that. We want to create a one-piece flow cell where the product can flow from raw material to in the box very, very quickly. So to do that, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go out and look at all these areas, and we're going to create a cell. So to create the cell, we're going to have to take one machine from each of these areas. So we want to understand what kind of work content is going on, and so we can create something called a percent loading chart where we go into each of these areas and we look at how much actual work is the worker doing on each of these steps. And let's assume that we have a tack time of 60 seconds. That means we have to produce one piece every 60 seconds. And what we find is that, for most of the operations, they're way below that, except for operation number 4. But if we has to go through all 8 steps and one step is above the tack time, then we can't meet the customer demand the way we are. We're just batching things and we're running overtime or whatever to catch up. So what we want to do is we want to get each operator up to the tack time. So if you look at this chart, that means that as we shift from the batch layout to the cell, the operator 1, 2, and 3 can all be combined. The work of those operators can all be combined into one, and that operator can also take about half of what number 4 does. The rest of what number 4 does, plus steps 5 and 6, can perhaps be combined and get up to 60 seconds, and then you have some left over. So the net result is when we look at this, we say, if we can move this from the functional layout into a one-piece flow, we don't need 8 operators anymore. We only need 3. We actually only need 2.65 or something like that, but we can't have a partial operator. So we're going to go from 8 to 3. Now that's a 60% reduction in lead time. I mean, in cost, in labor cost. So for most companies who look at lean as a cost reduction program, they, wow, that's great. We want the cost reduction. And we then spread these 3 workers out in the raw material cell, in a one-piece flow cell, where we can go from raw material to in the box. Now, if we have 3 workers, each working for 1 minute, and at the end a finished piece drops off, that means that the lead time went from 6 to 8 weeks to 3 minutes, right? But most companies miss that altogether. They don't understand that. They look at, gee, I got a 60% reduction in labor costs. And so the labor cost thing overwhelms their thinking. The idea that you can go from a 6-week lead time to a 3-minute lead time, it just goes right over their head. But that's the key thing that you got here. That's the main gain that you got, was the strategic gain, was the shortness of lead time. That's going to allow you to grow sales and gain market share and blah, blah, blah. The cost reduction is nice, but it's just a side effect. It's not really the real thing. It's just a side effect. So let's take a look at, when you look at all the issues I just mentioned that are pretty typical with a traditional batch company, you shouldn't be surprised that you can get some pretty good results when you move to lean. I'm going to give you several examples here. The first one is a company called Jake Brake. When I was a group executive at the Danaher Corporation, Jake Brake was one of my companies. And Jake Brake makes engine retarders for big diesel trucks. This is a device that sits on top of the engine and basically reverses the forward horsepower thrust into a braking thrust to slow the truck down. Now, when we started lean here in 1987, this business was almost going out of business. And you can see that from 88 to 99, look what happened. Revenue basically more than triple. Headcount stayed about the same. Floor space stayed exactly the same. Inventory turns went from 2 times to 25 times. Think about that. Think about the cash flow and the space that freed up. Our on-time delivery went from basically going out of business to 100% pretty much. Productivity, and this was measured in number of breaks per man hour, so it's a pretty good physical measurement. Going from 3 breaks per man hour to 35. Think about that. Jake Brake achieved about a 29% productivity gain every year for the first 5 years of this lean conversion. So just to give you some idea of what's possible. Lead time went from 85 days to 2 days. Operating income went from 4% to over 30. And one of the nice things is our development cycle dropped dramatically from 72 months to 16. Next example is my old company, Wiremold. Wiremold, by the way, makes electrical products for the electrical industry, sold through electrical distributors in the United States. Time period is from the end of 1991 to the middle of 2000. So
Mm.
about 9.5 years. And look what we did here. Lead times went from 4 to 6 weeks to 1 to 2 days. Productivity was way up. Gross margin, we gained 13 points of gross margin. And this was not a high-tech business. This was a pretty mundane metal stamping and injection molding kind of business. And 13 points of gross margin. Machine changeovers that used to be like 3 per week. Then we could change those. Now we could change these machines 20 to 30 times a day. We got some tremendous reductions in different setups of different types of machines. We took a rolling mill, for example, from 14 hours to 6 minutes. We took
Mhm.
a 150-ton punch press from 3 hours and 10 minutes to change over to 1 minute, and
Mhm.
on and on and on. As a result of that, our inventory turns went from 3 to 18 times. Customer service went from 50% to 98%. And
Mhm.
our sales, we more than quadruple sales. EBITDA grew from 6 to 21. Operating income was up 13.4 times. And the nicest thing was the enterprise value when we sold the company in 2000 increased by almost 2,500% over about a
Mhm.
9 year period.
Mhm.
So lean can give you some tremendous results.
Mhm.
Uh, Here's another one just to show you that's not just manufacturing. This is Virginia Mason Hospital. It's a
Mhm.
hospital in Seattle, Washington. When they first started their lean journey, they took 30 of their top people and they flew them across the country to Hartford, Connecticut to visit Wiremold. And
Mhm.
we showed them how to make things flow and how to what we were doing. And they went home. Then they went to Japan and visited Toyota, and
Mhm.
they came back. And look what happened over about 10 years. Their nurses spend 90% of their time with patients versus about 35% average in the rest of the United States. They cut supply costs by $1 million a year, cut their accounts receivable days by a lot. The surgery center, which is very capital intensive in any hospital, the case
Mhm.
time for surgery went down by 39%, and the cases per day went up by 60%. So the return on this big fixed investment was pretty enormous. And you can see it in the final margin. When they first started in 2000, they were making about $700,000 a year. 10
Mhm.
years later, they were making $41 million a year.
Wow.
Same facility, same everything. So
Mhm.
this is what lean can happen in a hospital. I'll give you one other example. This is a warehouse. This was a warehouse in one of my portfolio companies when I was in the private equity business. It was in a place called St. Nicholas, Belgium. And all we did, most warehouses, when they pick an order, they give someone the order and say, go pick this order. And somebody
Mhm.
runs around and picks the order. Well,
Mhm.
we stopped doing that. And we just changed from picking by order to picking by size and by time.
Mhm.
All we did, size and time. And look what happened. We cut our head count by 42%. We freed up 35,000 feet of square face, which saved us 180,000 bucks a year in rent.
Mhm.
We increased the number of picks per 10 feet of rack by 367%. That's a pretty good productivity gain.
Mhm.
And most important, we reduced the number of shipping areas by 90%. And we really spent almost no money doing this.
Mhm.
So um, the question then is, how do you get there? How do,
Mhm.
how do you how do you go from that batch state that I described to begin with
Mhm.
to a lean state? One thing I think you got to do is to start with, you got to focus on your processes, not your results. If you
Mhm.
remember, we said to begin with, a company is nothing but people, processes trying to deliver value.
Mhm.
Uh, if you don't change the processes, they're going to
Mhm.
deliver the same results that you've always had. But
Mhm.
most people don't do that. They want to do this make the month and think that they're going to come up with some magic thing.
Mhm.
They just leave their processes alone. They take them for granted. The
Mhm.
next thing is you got to teach everyone how to remove the waste. It's
Mhm.
really important if you want to convert to lean to get everybody on board. You can't you can't just rely on your salaried staff or something like that. And you really want to focus all your energies all the time on
Mhm.
how do you deliver more value to your customers.
Mhm.
Because lean really is if you think of it correctly, it's not a cost reduction program. It's a time-based growth strategy because every time you remove waste from something, you
Mhm.
shorten the time it takes to do that.
Mhm.
And the more waste you remove, the more time you have, the faster you can respond to the customer. So, if you can go like we showed the example before, if you go from a 6 week lead time to 3 minutes,
mm,
your response to the customer is going to be way better than your competition, and you're going to gain sales and you're going to grow and gain market share. It's as
mm,
simple as that.
mm,
So, what are the key steps? What are the things you have to focus on to do this? To me, there's really four lean fundamentals, and
mm,
what you should be about is driving these into the business every day.
mm, mm,
Every day you want to drive this into the business. So if I'm the CEO, and at the end of the day, I say to everybody, all my managers, I said, okay, does everything did everything work to tack time today? Is
mm,
everything in a one piece flow?
mm,
Do we have standard work every place, and are people actually following it? And
mm,
do we have a pull system every place, all the way from our suppliers out to
mm,
our end customer? Do we have a pull system? If
mm,
you if you can answer yes 100% to all of these things, you're
mm,
going to be in pretty good shape. But most of the time, to start out with, you're not going to be able to. You won't really be working to tack time.
mm,
You'll only have a few places where you have one piece flow.
mm,
Standard work will be spotty, and the pull system hadn't been invented yet. So, if you just drive these four things into your business constantly, you're
mm,
going to be quite successful.
mm,
Then you have to look at the management part of this, because converting to lean or converting any business has a lot to do with how does management behave.
mm,
So management, I call these the management must, these three things.
mm,
First of all, management have to understand that lean is the strategy. It's not a cost reduction program.
mm,
They have to understand that they have an obligation, because they have to lead this from the top. They can't
mm,
manage a conversion to lean. They can't delegate it or just demand it. They have to lead it.
mm,
And the next thing is that they have to understand that what they're trying to transform is the
mm,
people.
mm,
You remember the slide that I said a business is nothing more than people and processes trying to deliver value. Well,
mm,
the processes that you want to change, those were all created by the people. And so if you want to change the processes, you've got to transform the people. You got to get them to help you make better processes. So when you get right down to it, converting to lean, in my opinion, is all about people. This
mm,
isn't about capital spending or anything like that. It's all about people. How do you change the people? How do you get everybody on board going in the same direction?
mm,
Toyota calls it respect for people. I just say, it's all about people. Uh,
mhm,
so what are the key steps?
mm,
This is quite different than most uh, traditionally run companies do things. I think that if you're going to do this, you got to do two key things. One, you have to understand that what you're going to try and do is compete on your operational excellence.
mm,
If you're going to do that, the first thing you have to do is define what operational excellence means for you.
mm,
And these targets should all be very stretch goals. You shouldn't look at
mm,
today, what you're doing today, and say, I'm going to get 3% better, and that's going to make
mm,
me operationally
mm,
excellent. You got to
mm,
look at much stronger goals and say,
mm,
I want to go from A to way out here someplace.
mm,
So the first thing is you got to define those operational excellence goals. And I'll give you an example in a minute. The
mm,
second thing is you got to reorganize for lean. You got to get out of this functional structure that
mm,
we defined and showed you before, and you got
mm,
to go to a value stream structure. Now
mm,
that's pretty radical for most companies, because they've been in a functional structure forever. So
mm,
to switch to a value stream structure, and we call the value stream, really, we organize these around product families.
mm,
They were really like product family teams. Uh,
mm,
that was our value stream structure.
mm,
So the value stream structure, what we mean is that we're gonna create a team leader, and
mm,
let's say in charge of a product family, and
mm,
then we're going to give that team leader all of the equipment needed to make that product family complete, from raw material to in the box. We don't
mm,
want to have any excuses that Department A or Department B didn't give them the parts or some other kind of thing. We want to give them complete control of this
mm,
product family, right?
mm,
And then we want to give them all the support people we need to do that.
mm,
Uh, and then we want to create a KPO. That means Kaizen Promotion Office. And this
mm,
is a full-time group of people in
mm,
the facility, whose
mm,
whole job it is every day is
mm,
to organize and run and follow up on Kaizen activity, to
mm,
help the team leaders make the transition that they need to make.
mm,
And we also want everybody to understand that everything has to change. We
mm,
have to change our sales policy. I told you we got rid of the thing that was driving 50% shipments in the last week of the month. We stopped going after big batch orders, all those kind of things.
mm,
And then we had to change the finance system and the change away from standard cost accounting to lean accounting. And this
mm,
was true in HR, it was true in product development, IT, across the board. Everything has to change.
mm,
So I said, you're going to compete on your operational excellence goals.
mm,
What should they be? So these are the ones that we created at Wiremold.
mm,
Uh, you don't want to have too many. I mean, one of the problems I see in most corporations is that
mm,
they have 10 or 12 number one goals.
mm,
Well, that's impossible. They're not going to complete any of them.
mm,
It's, I mean, think of that as like a juggler. If I have a juggler that can
mm,
juggle three balls, and
mm,
he's great at juggling three balls, but if
mm,
I say I want you to try and juggle four balls, he'll say, "Oh,
mm,
I'll try it," and
mm,
then he's not capable. So he drops when he drops the fourth ball. He doesn't just drop the fourth ball. He drops all the balls.
mm,
So if a
mm,
company has 12 number one priorities,
mm,
nothing's going to happen. None of them will get done. So
mm,
keep the number of goals to a small number. In our case, 5, and this is what they were: 100% on-time customer service,
mm,
50% reduction in defects every year,
mm,
20% productivity gain each year. I told you the
mm,
Great Break did 29% a year for
mm,
the first 5 years.
mm,
Uh, 20 times inventory turns. We were at 3, by the way, so this was a shocking idea for everybody. And
mm,
visual control in the 5S everywhere.
mm,
Now, if you have these stretch goals, you're not going to get to them all right away. Obviously,
mm,
go from 3 to 20 times inventory turns, you can't do that by next Thursday. It's going to
mm,
take you a number of years, and if you don't take it at some sort of pace, you're going to blow the company up.
mm,
But what it does is it's way different than if I said, okay, we're at 3 inventory turns. Our operational excellence goal is to get to 5. Well,
mm,
that would be a joke, wouldn't it? Because people would say, well, that's not a big deal. We can just keep doing what we're doing. We'll
mm,
just do it a little bit better, and maybe we'll get to 5. But if I
mm,
say you got to go from 3 to 20, well, wait a minute, that's a whole different story. Now I
mm,
got to think about this completely different. You're making my head hurt, right?
mm,
So if you don't set operational excellence goals,
mm,
the reaction from everybody is, "Are you kidding me?" If
mm,
you don't get that reaction, then you didn't set them strong enough, in my opinion, right?
mm,
You gotta be reaching out there all the time. Now, once you have the value stream structure and have the operational excellence goals,
mm,
how should you run the company? I mean, we've been running the company on this make the month, big monthly reviews on the financial numbers of something that already happened. So
mm,
what we did is we said, the heck with that. That's all waste. Let's change the way we run the company. So
mm,
what we did is we managed to our operational excellence goals.
mm,
And the way we did that was we assigned all these goals to our value stream leaders, our team leaders, right?
mm,
That meant because they had most of the people, this
mm,
meant that almost all of the people in the company were focused all the time on these 5 goals
mm,
because that's what the team leaders were focused on.
mm,
And then we reviewed the progress on these 5 goals with the team leaders, with myself and all my staff once a week.
mm,
So we were looking forward all the time as to how we're doing on these goals. We weren't looking backwards as to what
mm,
happened last month. We
mm,
limited the presentations to 10 minutes and,
mm,
to just make this efficient. And they
mm,
had to tell us what was their progress on the goals year to date. And then they had to tell us what's their plan for next week for improvements. So
mm,
it was very, very concise. And
mm,
then senior management was there to help, not to criticize. But because we had the whole senior management team in the room, if
mm,
a team was having some problems or there was some issues or communication issues, we could solve all those on the spot, right?
mm,
So this was a very efficient way and effective way to run a business,
mm,
very different than the way a traditional company runs.
mm,
So once you've got the structure, you've got the operational excellence goals, then there's a few other things you need to kind of clean up on, and I call this dump your bad habits, right?
mm,
Get rid
mhm,
of get rid of this crazy stuff that you've been doing
mm,
forever as a traditional batch company.
mm,
One of those is these major end of month reviews. I mean,
mm,
when you get into big companies, you'll find that people spend 2 or 3 weeks a month
mm,
preparing for these reviews and analyzing data and then go into the review and making the presentation
mm,
and nothing changes. It's just a waste of a lot of effort that could be used at improving the processes. And then to get rid of some of the traditional measurements. I mean, one of my favorites is finance organizations always want to measure direct to indirect hourly people.
mm,
How many direct people do you have versus indirect people?
mm,
That's a crazy measurement. It forces really bad decisions. You know,
mm,
when you look at it that way, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. I mean, a lot of times in lean,
mm,
you might go from 10 people to five, and then
mm,
put one of them back to be the material handler or the water spider to help make the five efficient.
mm,
Now, and under this kind of measurement, that person would have to go away, and
mm,
so we wouldn't be able to make the other five people efficient.
mm,
So it's looking at things in a very traditional way that's wrong.
mm,
And then I would say get rid of the lengthy capital spending processes. When I was at GE, to get any kind of major capital spending, not even it didn't even have to be that major. It could
mm,
take us 3 to 4 months to go up the chain to get it all approved, and
mm,
nothing ever changed. They always said yes, but we tied up a lot of people for a lot of time
mm,
messing around with that. That's all waste. Get
mm,
rid of standard cost accounting, as I said before,
mm,
so that you can see what's going on, you can make better
mm,
decisions, and then
mm,
stop doing stupid things at the end of the month to make the month. You know, this is sales tricks, stupid sales tricks, and other things like that that
mm,
companies traditionally do. So you got to change. You got to get away from a lot of the things that you're very used to doing and
mm,
change the way you do things.
mm,
Then the way you want to implement it is with a strong Kaizen process.
mm,
Um, you know, the way we organized the Kaizen team, we had, let's say, half salaried people and half hourly people. We always had hourly people from the operation, what we were trying to improve, because
mm,
they had the best knowledge. They always come up with the best ideas.
mm,
And, you know, we would take a team of people, 8 to 10 people, and we'd take them off their full-time job for a full week. So they did nothing but focus on the Kaizen. No, they didn't do any of their other work, just
mm,
the Kaizen.
mm,
And we gave them very stretched goals at the beginning of
mm,
the week. You know,
mm,
stretch goals that people say, you can't do that. And almost always by the end of the week, they did do that. And
mm,
these are the kind of things that can happen. This is pretty normal. Cut
mm,
lead times by 90%, cut the staffing in half, cut
mm,
inventory by 70%, reduce floor space by 50%,
mm,
reduce defects by 60%, reduce travel time by 60%. We were able at Wiremold, every time we did a setup reduction Kaizen, we were
mm,
pretty much able to reduce setup on any kind of equipment by about 90% in 1 week.
mm,
Now, if you ask a normal engineer to cut setup by 50%, they
mm,
would go to a catalog and try and buy some automated equipment or something to do that. Uh,
mm,
you know, how much money can you spend in a week? You can't spend much money, right?
mm,
So these are the kind of results. And if you keep doing these over and over and over, and always getting this kind of results, it
mm,
doesn't take long to start to really see some tremendous results to your bottom line.
mm,
Now, and in addition, we'll go back to the leader again. What's the leader's role in this conversion?
mm,
First of all, they have to lead by example. They need to be out on the floor. They need to be
mm,
on Kaizens. My feeling is that as you convert to lean, the
mm,
senior management of any company need to
mm,
commit to being on at least 5 to 6 full week Kaizen events every year. And
mm,
the CEO should be on 12 full week Kaizen events
mm,
every year. Because if you don't, you
mm,
know, lean is learned by doing. And if you're not on these events, you're not learning, you're not going to understand lean. And if
mm,
you don't understand it, you're not going to ask for the stretch goals. You're not, you know, you won't believe what can happen. And
mm,
so it's hard to lead lean if you don't understand it. And so you got to do the learn by doing.
mm,
And the leaders also have to continue to make the case for change because people don't like change. They get afraid, they're afraid of it. And so someone has to keep making the case as to why do we want to do this? Why do we want to change? What's the importance of it? And then the leader also has to be the one who takes the leaps of faith and I say overcome the law. You know, every time a traditional company moves from the functional organization into a one-piece flow cell, that
mm,
means they're going to probably have to move equipment around. And
mm,
in the back of the mind is always the question, well, what if this doesn't work? You know,
mm,
what if it doesn't work? Should
mm,
we really go ahead and do this?
mm,
And so someone has to say, yes, do it. That's the leap of faith, right? So lean, in my opinion, it's just a continuous series of leaps of faith.
mm,
And then the leader also has to overcome the lore. I'll give
mm,
you a little, all industries, every industry has some lore or basic beliefs about how things are done or what's possible.
mm,
Years ago, I was on the board of directors of a small jewelry manufacturing company down in North Miami Beach, Florida.
mm,
They were having some trouble. They asked me to come down and take a look, and so I went down. I said, "Well, here's the factory. How long does it take you to make a ring? Now,
mm,
this is a ring, a ring is small. It goes on your finger.
mm,
They were using gold and precious stones and all that, but they were selling to the middle market. They
mm,
were they weren't selling to Tiffany's and those kind of people. They were selling to Sears and Roebuck and J.C. Penney, Montgomery Ward, the big retailers, Walmart. Um, so I said, how long does it take you to make a ring?
mm,
He said, oh, it takes 8 weeks. I said, you got to be kidding. 8 weeks. What can
mm,
you possibly do to
mm,
that little thing that
mm,
will take 8 weeks? It doesn't make any sense. What are you talking about?
mm,
And so anyway, right after that, for some reason or other, I ran into two or three other people in the jewelry industry.
mm,
And I asked every single one of them, how long does it take you to make a ring?
mm,
Everyone, 8 weeks. They all said 8 weeks. So
mm,
that's the kind of law. That's something that the jewelry industry believes and understands is that's normal. That's the way it always has been.
mm,
So if this company went out and tried to hire a new head of operations,
mm,
all the specifications on that hunt for the new person would be has to have jewelry experience, right? That would
mm,
be pretty normal. Now, and that person is going to come in with his jewelry experience, and he's going to understand that it takes 8 weeks, so he's not
mm,
going to try and change it.
mm,
So what I did was I changed it where we could make a ring in 2 days.
mm,
Basically we worked. I had it set up. I set up a flow line. The
mm,
first cell we worked was with J.C. Penney,
mm,
and basically he said anything that comes in, any order that comes in by 4 o'clock today, we'll ship it tomorrow.
mm,
We had an overnight. We had to create a plaster of Paris mold for this, and that had to dry overnight.
mm,
And so you couldn't speed that up in the short term. Over time, I think you could, but we couldn't do it in the short run.
mm,
So overnight, we would dry out the plaster of Paris. The next morning, we'd pour the gold in, and then
mm,
we'd process the ring down a one-piece flow line. And
mm,
and right at the end of the line, we had the packaging and shipping. I
mm,
mean, they used to have that in a whole separate room in a whole separate building. It was crazy. And
mm,
so, you know, that this is overcoming the law from 8 weeks to 2 days.
mm,
And getting people to believe that even though we did that and we could show people, we could take the management team out on the floor and show them, they still didn't believe it.
mm,
They just couldn't grasp that.
mm,
So basically, the CEO has to be the lean zealot. If you don't have the CEO as a lean zealot,
mm,
you're just not going to get too far, in my opinion.
mm,
And you see a lot of companies where they start down the lean path and then they change the CEO or there's something, and then everything stops because the new guy wants to do something different, right?
mm,
So, in summary, lots of opportunity to go from traditional batch to lean. But
mm,
as my old sensei, Chihiro Nakao, used to tell me, Burn-san, if you don't try something, no
mm,
knowledge can visit you. I always think
mm,
that that's a great comment. If you don't try something, no knowledge can visit you. And that's true.
mm, mm,
So, in your own area, your own company, if you don't try something, nothing will happen either. So I
mm,
hope you'll try something and you can move in this direction because
mm,
lean creates an unfair competitive advantage.
mm,
And if you can move from 6 week lead times to 2 days,
mm,
and your competitors don't, you have a tremendous unfair competitive advantage.
mm,
So that's a summary of what it takes to do a lean turnaround.
mm. Excellent. I love this. It was a real good flow. I need to talk to you since you mentioned Sensei Nakao. Uh, when I spoke to Rico Keno, who worked with Iwata and Nakao, she quoted Iwata, Sensei Iwata, by saying, we not only take the horse to the water, but we make it drink it, taste it.
Right.
That's one. The second one that Rico quoted Iwata to me was, we come and preach Toyota production system, Toyota management system, but then it's left to you to evolve it based on your people, process, and culture of your organization. Please don't try to copy us. These are the two statements that Rico Keno told me what Iwata said. And since she mentioned you too in that interaction that we had, just take me through those two things. Iwata, since Iwata saying that you got to make the horse drink the water and taste it. I'm taking from the last slide that you said, if you don't do something, you don't have knowledge. It was Sensei Nakao, if I'm pronouncing that word right,
Right,
said.
okay.
The second one was, don't copy us. Evolve, you understand the basic principle, back to basics, get the basics, and then evolve it around your people, process, and the culture of your organization. Your take on that, Art? That's the only question that I have.
Yeah, well, I mean, Awada was my first sensei. We were at Danaher. We were the first um, American company to use the Shingijutsu consultants. We were their first business outside of the United States, and they
Mm,
were exclusive to us for 4 years.
mm,
So we spent a lot of time with them and learned a lot from them.
mm,
I'll give you another quote from Awada. We were sitting around at lunch one day, and they had been showing us a lot of things on the shop floor, and
mm,
myself and the guy that ran Jake Brake, he worked for me. We said, Mr. Awada, this stuff, this Toyota production system that you're teaching us,
mm,
this is the most amazing strategic weapon that we've ever seen. You
mm,
know, why isn't everybody doing this?
mm,
He just laughed and he said, look, I can tell you about the Toyota production system.
mm,
I can take you and show you the Toyota production system,
mm,
but I bet you can't go home and do it. And that's very true. And
mm,
it's always been very true
mm,
because it's the shift to lean is
mm,
180 degrees different than
mm,
traditional approach.
mm,
And so if you start and you don't have someone like a water and the cow with you pushing you in the right direction all the time, in
mm,
other words, forcing you to drink the water,
mm,
if you don't have them there,
mm,
you'll go backwards right away because your people will say, "Oh, this will never work here. Oh, we can't do
mm,
that."
mm,
Everybody. There's a zillion excuses that people have as to why you don't want to make this change.
mm,
And so having the outside consultants like Awada
mm,
with you to force you to drink is
mm,
very, very important. And what he says is also correct. We were making electrical products. We didn't make cars. We were never going to be Toyota,
mm,
uh, and we never tried to be Toyota. We tried to be the best wire mold that we could be,
mm,
using the philosophy and the things that they taught us,
mm,
the way that Toyota went about things.
mm,
So I think all the things you just said are very true.
mm. So I was reading one of the articles that it was on Ask Art, and I've been following you on Ask Art. Is with respect to people. One of the things that you mentioned in that article was this was never mentioned during Iwata's time when Iwata introduced you, and as you went around the journey, and somewhere when the Toyota Way came in, I don't know the understand. I mean, I understand the sequence that Toyota started talking about respect for people. And then they said there are two pillars, that is continuous improvement pillar and respect for people. That is the Toyota way, the best side. So there was a journey that I read in a question that was asked to you. Can you just touch on that with respect to respect for people?
Sure. Well, of course, that whole thing that you just mentioned about the Toyota way and continuous improvement and respect for people, we we never heard about respect for people from Toyota before. We were doing lean way before that ever came out,
Mm,
uh, and so we never followed that principle because they said it. We followed it because it made sense.
mm,
We always respected people. I
mm,
always I always felt that the CEO or the leader
mm,
had three real obligations to their people. One, you got to protect their job. The
mm,
best way to do that is if you can make the company be a growing and thriving enterprise, you're going to protect everybody's jobs.
mm,
Two, you had to improve their skills.
mm,
You had to train them and give them more skills. And as we move from batch to lean,
mm,
taking somebody who maybe has run one machine for 10 years,
mm,
and that's their skill. And
mm,
now we're going to move them into a one-piece flow cell, and
mm,
we're going to teach them how to do setup production. They're going to have to run 8 different machines. So we're vastly expanding their skills. And
mm,
the third thing that I think you have to do is you have to give the worker, your operator, your people, all your people, a chance to gain from to be rewarded for the gains that they're going to create.
mm,
And we did that through a profit sharing plan. We had a profit sharing plan that paid out. And
mm,
when I first got to Wiremold, it was paying out at about a 1% of people's pay.
mm,
Um, as we started to do lean, we said our target is to get it to be pay out at 20% of your pay.
mm,
We got there a few quarters, but then we'd buy some new company and it would go down. But we probably averaged around 14% payout.
mm,
That was pretty significant to most people. So they understood as they submitted ideas and as they helped us remove the waste,
mm,
a lot of the money and the gains from that was going to go in their pocket.
mm,
So, if you think about those three things,
mm,
secure the job, improve their skills, and give them a piece of the reward, I
mm,
think that you're thinking about respect for people the right way.
mm. Art, uh, way back in 1977, I was 27 years old, and
I thought you're still 27 years old.
I love you for that. I love you for that. Uh, yeah, I'm curious enough. Yes, the curiosity has never stopped me. So I'm talking with myself. So 1977, I had this good luck of hearing Peter Drucker in person, uh, and he spoke to me, or spoke to us about auto motivation. And I was working in a large public sector aviation industry, and something that struck me and it still holds good for me is he told us that don't expect people to come and hold you by a finger and motivate you. You got to develop yourself to motivate yourself. That's what he told me. He told us. Now that I took it around right my career paths. Now, when people talk about toxicity in the organization, they can't do anything about it, helplessness, leaders should change. I mean, you said that Lean was a human resource people's movement. I understand that leaders have to do their part of it. But then you can't get, and in as much as you can't get the perfect vision of one piece flow in as a vision, you can't get a perfect organization that you work in. Now, it's quite okay that if you can't bear the heat in the kitchen, you move out of the kitchen. That's one way, but many of us have to get food to the table. Any advice to the youngsters and the group of people that you have? We have said enough of, I mean, it's enough of, we know about.
Well, this is a question that I get at any presentation I've ever made, which is, gee, we really like that. Can you come to our company and convince our CEO to do lean? And I always just say, I'm not going to come to you. If he doesn't want to do it, I'm not going to convince him. Forget that.
Mm,
So they say, well, what can we do? What can we do about it? I
mm,
think, well, you can try it yourself. It's like you just said, take some initiative yourself. If
mm,
you if you are in charge of a small product line or a small area in the plant or someplace else in the business, you can use the lean tools and the lean approach to improve your own operation.
mm,
And if you get some really big gains, don't make a big deal out of it. Don't make a lot of noise. Just do it.
mm,
And then if you have something really impressive to show, you
mm,
can bring the CEO and the senior people down and say, let's look what we did."
mm,
And they're going to say, "Well, gee, that's great. How did you do that?"
mm,
I say, "Well, we use lean, and this is why lean is good, and we can work across the whole company." And
mm,
if they have an example right in their own business, it's a little harder for them to deny that this is something that would work,
mm,
because it's already working in their company. And so I think that's one of the best ways to do it, because otherwise, what you're going to find, and people say, well, we're not a car company, that'll never work here, or we're not this kind of company, it'll never work here. And oh, gee, Jake Brake and Wiremold got good results, but we'll never get that.
mm,
We can't go to 20 times inventory turns. Here's 25 reasons why that'll never happen.
mm,
Or we can't take setup reduction from 3 hours to 1 minute because here's 20 reasons why that'll never happen.
mm,
And so every company has people like that. And they've, if you've done something the same way for 20 years,
mm,
and I come in and say, look, everything here is no good, well,
mm,
you're going to react to that. Like, wait a minute, you can't come in here and say that. You just showed up here and say everything's no good.
mm,
So I have to show you, right? I can't just say that. I have to show you. So it's the same thing from what you said. If I can show you an example in your own company that I created in
Mm,
my area, maybe I can get you to be more interested in lean. Maybe I can get you to open your eyes and start to think about this.
mm. This isn't that equally true for the internal consultants that they have who are focusing on lean or whatever continuous improvement, that they don't get sucked into the culture? Like what you give the example of the culture of a jewelry industry. It's taken for granted it takes 8 weeks or what have you. And then what's the how does an internal consultant in an organization doesn't get sucked into that culture and probably taking a clue from what you said, try it out somewhere, uh, boil a cup of water instead of the notion. I don't know how do you go about it. What's your advice to the internal consultants?
Well, I think if you're having if you create a Kaizen promotion office, then the only reason you have it is to do lots of Kaizen. So they're not going to get sucked into any culture because the reason they're in the Kaizen promotion office is the CEO changed the culture and created a Kaizen promotion office.
Hmm.
So, I mean, they're only there for that reason and everybody understands it. So
Hmm.
they're not going to get sucked into any culture. The culture is changing, right?
Hmm.
Now, if you're an external consultant, then you come into a company like that. It's a bigger problem. It's really hard to get companies to do the right thing. And I think the only really good lean consultants that I met
Hmm.
are the ones that practice the traditional Toyota approach, the way that Shingijutsu taught us, and B, are willing to fire their customers.
Hmm.
Because, if you go into a company and say, we're going to show you how to do lean, oh, yeah, yeah, we're all excited. And then
Hmm.
you find after a couple of months or whatever that you showed them this and then they didn't do it. You showed them this other thing, they didn't do it. You showed something else, they didn't do it. At that point, you got to just say, well, we're not going to work with you anymore because you obviously aren't going to do this. And you're going to give us a bad name and a bad reputation if someone says you work for those guys and they're no good. So, but most consultants, once they get in, they're more interested in covering their overhead and getting revenue,
Hmm.
and so they give up their principles
Hmm.
for the money. And there's a lot of consultants running around saying they're lean, but lean experts, but they're not. They don't really understand that they're maybe trying to sell you an MRP program or some other kind of some computer program,
Hmm.
but they don't really understand lean. And I saw all that early on. I don't know how it is now. I haven't tried to hire any consultants for a long time.
Art, in as much as an external consultant have got many clients, they can say, if you don't follow my way, it is my way or highway. Uh, but the internal people can't do that.
Yeah, most people will say, well, then, okay, highway for you. Because it's like I said before, if I walked in and said everything here is no good right away, and by the way, when we first started working with Shinjujutsu and Mr. Iwata, the first visit that we had was in our Jacob's Chuck plant in Clemson, South Carolina.
Mm.
And it was, we're making drill chucks for the end of a machine tool, a drill.
Mm.
Uh, and we walked in and we said, we're going to give you a 45-minute overview of a drill chuck and how it works. And they said, no, 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 we have those in Japan too. What do you want to do next? So we said, let's do the plant tour. We thought the plant tour would take about an hour and a half because every time we ever gave a plant tour, it took about an hour and a half.
Mm.
We got about, I don't know, maybe 300 feet out into the factory, not very far. And Iwata put up his hand and he says, okay, we've seen enough. Let's go back in the conference room.
Mm.
So I said, but wait a minute. We only saw, we've seen enough. Let's go back.
Mm.
Back in the conference room, he goes up to the board and in great big letters, he writes the words, no good.
Mm.
Then he turns around and he says, look, everything here is no good. What do you want to do about it?
Mm.
That was how we started. I mean, that's exactly how we started our lean journey with Shinjujutsu. Now, I would say that over 90% of all companies, if a consultant came in and did that to them, they would throw them out.
Mm.
They would just say, oh, no, wait a minute, you can't say that. That's not true. We don't believe that. And that would be the end of the relationship right there. We said, we begged them to come and help us. So if you
Mm.
want to say everything's no good, we agree with you. Let's tell us what to do.
Mm.
And I think that's the difference. I think that, think of it this way. and I may be completely nuts about this, but most people are insecure, right, to some extent.
Mm,
Some people are very, very insecure,
mm,
and but doesn't mean they're not smart. And some of
mm,
those very insecure, smart people become CEOs.
mm,
And then, so that's one type of CEO. And another type of CEO is sort of what I call a command and control CEO. You know,
mm,
if something goes wrong, the first question asked is who? Who did that?
mm,
So they're always looking for someone to blame. It's never going to be their fault.
mm,
And the insecure CEO is the same. They can't ever be wrong. They have to always be right. They don't want to make any mistakes. And if those two types of CEOs make up half, let's say they make up half of all the CEOs,
mm,
those two personality types, they can't take they can't take any leaps of faith. That's impossible for them. The
mm,
whole the whole mentality won't allow that to occur because there's risk in that. There's risk for them personally in that of
mm,
taking a leap of faith. And what if, the question of what if it doesn't work? They don't want any part of that. And so it's very difficult for a personality like that to go down the lean path and take the risks and take the chances that you're going to take by making all these changes. And so I think from my point of view that about half of all the companies will never do this because they have leadership like that. I could be totally wrong, but
No, no, under that circumstances, what does an internal consultant do? Because
well,
make
he needs to go get himself another job. Yeah,
okay.
if he has that kind of leader, nothing, he's not going to get anything done. No way.
I think that answers a lot of other questions. Now, just a single question. I want you to make the clear distinction between a change and a transformation. To me, a transformation is like a caterpillar becoming a butterfly, but there is an intermittent stage in which there's a cocoon stage. That's for me a transformation and not a change. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know. I never gave any thought to caterpillars and
Now
change.
I'm asking you to think about it because people have to get into that cocoon stage, which is suffocating.
Well, I would define it a little differently because I would think that a transformation means you've changed from a traditional kind of culture to a lean culture.
Mm,
If you make the transformation correctly, it's very difficult to go back.
mm,
Whereas maybe what you're saying as a change is, okay, we made some changes, but we didn't change the culture. And so when the current CEO leaves and the
mm,
new guy comes in, the whole thing collapses
mm,
because
mm, mm,
we didn't transform it. We just did a few changes here and there,
mm,
right? We didn't get the culture to change
mm,
because one of the things I found is that people who do lean correctly in a real lean organization,
mm,
they can't go back to a
mm,
batch culture. They can't
mm,
go work in a batch culture anymore. It doesn't make any sense to them,
mm,
you know? And because they've seen one way to do it, and they know, and they go back into the old way to do it, and they can't do it. It's
mm,
impossible.
mm,
And that's because they've changed culturally. They've changed
mm,
mentally and culturally because
mm,
of the experience that they've had. So um, I think to do I call it the lean turnaround, lean transformation, whatever word you want to use, but you have to change the culture. Culture has to change.
mm,
I have an article recently, I think last December, on how do you create a lean culture in my
mm,
LEI post. It's I think
mm,
last December. It's a pretty long article, but it
mm,
talks about converting the culture as not just one or two simple things. There's a lot of things that go into that, and
mm.
it has to have management involved the whole way.
Art, when will you give me an opportunity again to talk over the specific thing about the change of culture, the article that you wrote in December? Can I have an episode with you? I'll come back to you. I would love you to be back on my episode.
Yeah, we could try and do that. You
Yeah,
should go and read the article, and then we can talk more.
I would do that. I would do that. Thanks a lot, Art. Love you for that. And
Okay.
namaste from India. And
All
please
right.
come to India. Please do.
Thank you very much.
We need a lot of art in India. Thanks a lot.